the board first, and then I'm going to leave it to introduce yourselves. So the first person next to me is Tamika Halwendi. She's the Climate Change and Environmental Sustainability Coordinator. Next to her is the Head of Programs, Mr. Raymond Mutale. Next to him is the Chairman Executive Director. Target is Mr. Chimpara Chiwinga, who is the Governance and Institutional Strengthening Manager. So now I'll ask the lady over here to introduce herself and to go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nyambe. I'm the
Good morning, everyone. My name is Samson Kwanda from KBN TV. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Josephat from KBN.
Good morning. My name is Charles Zulu from Diamond TV.
Good morning. I'm John from Prime TV.
Good morning. My name is Julia.
Good morning, my name is Lucian.
Good morning. My name is Jason.
My name is Coran.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm one from here.
Okay. So have all the introductions been done? Has anyone just introduced themselves?
My name is
Thank you so much. So now we are going to move to welcome remarks, and these are going to be done by the Governance and Institutional Training.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Zambia and Happy New Year. Thank you. Right, so basically I'm just giving the introduction and the main aspect of the director. So yeah, you are welcome to Transparency International Zambia, and this is our first briefing that we are having for here, and basically we concentrate on our monitoring the Kawamba by-election ahead of the Bakashi and the Saudi by-election, but also most importantly, to just update you of some of the important activities or events that Transparency International Zambia is going to have in the first quarter of 2025. So with this, I welcome you all to Transparency International for this press briefing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chiringa. We are now going to move to statements read by Executive Director, Mr. Mwanza.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. And let me also take this opportunity to wish all of you very happy. Thank you for joining us for this very first press briefing of the new year. And as mentioned by Mr. Chiringa, in our address today, we'll be giving a very complete reflection on the recently held Kawamba parliamentary by-election, which of course took place last month, and which we had the opportunity to monitor as I said. We're also going to be looking forward to the forthcoming by-election in the Tauke and Bambashi constituencies, and we'll share some thoughts related to some upcoming key events that are going to be taking place in the context of our work as TIZ. So ladies and gentlemen, TIZ did send a team on the ground to monitor the Kawamba parliamentary by-election as part of the wider cohort of election monitors and observers from different entities. In the wake of the election results are being announced, we did of course give an initial reaction where we congratulated the winner, but we stated that we would give a more comprehensive position in due course. So we are now happy to share this position, and we will be highlighting 6 main subjects or reflections in that respect. So the first issue that we wish to reflect on has to do with the electoral practices. As part of our comprehensive monitoring of the by-election, we received information on the happenings at various electoral events, such as campaign rallies that were taking place across the entire constituency of Kawamba. Consequently, TIZ became aware of reports of electoral malpractices such as vote buying and the use of government programs to induce voters. There were several incidences of vote buying through the provision of food items, cash, transport services, among others, and in our view, this compromised the integrity of the election. For example, there were incidences of senior government officials from the ruling United Party for National Development engaging in the practice of dishing out 50 kwacha notes and other gifts to the electorate under the guise of empowering citizens through government empowerment programs. Ladies and gentlemen, the Electoral Process Act number 35 of 2016 clearly defines the offering of money or gifts to voters as an electoral offense, and the level of impunity with which this was happening in Kawamba left a lot to be desired. The second issue we'd like to reflect on is the issue of campaign financing. Now, as some of you know, Article 60, Clause 4 of the Constitution of Zambia provides for the establishment of the Political Parties Fund for the regulation of sources of funding and maximum amounts for campaigns during elections. However, in the absence of a substantive law to actualize these constitutional provisions, electoral financing remains largely unregulated in Zambia. Consequently, TIZ noted that the UPND were significantly more visible in terms of campaign materials in Kawamba in comparison with other political parties. Now, for us, this highlighted the importance of sustaining the conversation around political party financing in Zambia. While there may be some resistance in some circles, it is clear that funding political parties in some shape or form will contribute to the strengthening of our democracy, given that political parties are a central element of any country's democracy. We therefore urge government to expedite the enactment of legislation on political party and campaign financing in order to contribute to the enhancement of Zambia as a democracy. The third issue we're reflecting on has to do with the independence of the Electoral Commission of Zambia. Now, several stakeholders representing some opposition political parties shared with TIZ several concerns over the ECZ's independence at different levels of its structure during the Kawamba by-election. TIZ notes that while the Constitution of Zambia stipulates that the ECZ shall have offices in provinces and progressively in districts, the Commission continues to rely on town clerks and council secretaries to serve as district electoral officers, tasked with the responsibility of administering the polls at district level. TIZ is of the view that this situation is undesirable, as it potentially creates confusion for the ECZ officials at district level that are mandated to administer by-elections in their execution of duties. But beyond this, we are of the view that throwing this responsibility onto the state council officials is effectively an abdication of responsibility on the part of the ECZ, and we call on them to make immediate amends to strengthen the management of elections at district level. Specifically, TIZ recommends for the appointment of independent ECZ and district officials, as this will increase confidence among all stakeholders in the independence of the ECZ. The fourth issue we are reflecting on has to do with the enforcement of laws. Now, Chaiz noted that during the campaign period, none of the 4 political parties came into conflict with the Public Order Act. The police enforced the Public Order Act and other standard operating procedures in a fair manner, and this provided a fair playing field for the participating political parties insofar as implementation of that particular law was concerned. We commend the Zambia Police Service for this and encourage them to build on this practice for future elections. However, the ECZ would have done better in terms of enforcing its regulatory power under the Electoral Code of Conduct, as evidenced by the non-sanctioning of electoral malpractices, such as the dishing out of money, as stated earlier. We now wish to reflect on the issue of women participation. Ladies and gentlemen, Articles 45 and 47 of the Constitution of Zambia provide for gender equity in the National Assembly as well as in councils. Chaiz noted that all the 4 political parties that participated in the Kawamba parliamentary by-election nominated the male candidates. This may be due to the prohibitive nomination fees, minimum education requirements, lack of intra-party policies to support women participation, and gaps in the overall regulatory framework to ensure full inclusion and participation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities in line with regional and international standards. We therefore wish to urge all political parties in Zambia to seriously reflect on this and create fair and equitable opportunities for their female members to take part in the electoral process, including as candidates for elections at different levels. The last issue that we'd like to reflect on is the issue of political violence. During the campaign period and on election day itself, there were 2 incidences of electoral violence, largely perpetrated by supporters of both the UPND and the New Congress Party in collaboration with the Tonse Alliance members. While the pre-election and polling day violence did not seem to have any impact on the number of people turning out to exercise their right to vote, it did nevertheless leave an indelible and unwanted stain on the entire electoral process in Kawamba. We therefore urge all political parties never to lose cognizance of the importance of maintaining peace throughout the electoral process. And we urge the ECZ and the Zambia Police Service to take strong punitive measures on any political players that engage in violence of any sort. Ladies and gentlemen, our monitoring of the Kawamba by-election allowed us to develop and roll out a web-based campaign finance monitoring tool to track political parties' campaign spending in elections. This innovation is anchored on Article 60, Clause 4, sub-clauses C and D of the Constitution of Zambia, and its main objective is to track the cost of politics from the pre-adoption, the adoption, the campaign spending, as well as the post-election periods. We will be using this tool in all subsequent elections, including the forthcoming parliamentary by-elections in Petauke and Pambashe, the former of which we will be on the ground to monitor. Now, all these election monitoring activities will culminate into the launch of the Elections Monitoring Report in March 2025, which will contribute to strengthening electoral integrity and promoting free and fair elections in Zambia. Now, in addition to our elections monitoring work over the next few weeks, we would also like to draw your attention, and indeed that of the Zambian citizenry, to the upcoming launch of the 2024 Corruption Perception Index report and the launch of the Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey report. The launch of all these reports will constitute the main activities that TIZ will be undertaking during the first quarter of 2025. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Corruption Perceptions Index, or ZBPI in short, is the most widely used global measure of corruption, and it ranks 108 countries and territories across the world in terms of their level of public sector corruption. As you may recall, the 2023 CPI showed Zambia's score improving by 4 points. And as we look forward to the launch of the 2024 CPI, which is scheduled for 11th February 2025, we call on all stakeholders to reflect on Zambia's present anti-corruption efforts. It is important to note that the CPI is conducted at a global level, and as such, TIZ has no influence of any sort on the findings. We therefore call upon all stakeholders to gain familiarity with the scope and methodology of the CPI in order to avoid the usual trend of issuing uninformed reactions to the results. Ladies and gentlemen, in partnership with the Anti-Corruption Commission, TIZ is in the process of finalizing the 2024 Zambia Bribe Payers Index, or ZBPI, report. The purpose of the ZBPI is to generate an empirical evidence base to support stakeholders in the designing and implementation of appropriate anti-corruption interventions. In terms of indicators, the ZBPI measures the likelihood of paying a bribe solicited by a public officer from any of the public institutions featured in the survey. In the 2022 ZBPI, the overall aggregate bribery index was 10.1%, which was a decrease from 10.9% recorded in 2019. As we look forward to the launch of the 2024 ZBPI, which is scheduled for the end of next month, TIZ calls upon the public institutions in the survey to take stock of their anti-corruption efforts during the past 2 years. The ZBPI is not aimed at naming and shaming selected public institutions, but is an attempt at providing a credible basis for corrective action. You may further wish to know that the results of this survey inform the development of engagement strategies for both ourselves as TIZ and the Anti-Corruption Commission in strengthening integrity standards with public institutions and combating bribery in general. As I conclude, TIZ calls upon all stakeholders to support the launch of the 2024 CPI, the 2024 ZBPI, and the elections monitoring reports during this first quarter of 2025. We also call upon you, our colleagues in the media, public, and other stakeholders to familiarize themselves with the scope and methodology of all these assessments in order to provide informed reactions once these reports are published. Lastly, as the Petauke and Pambashe by-elections are drawn closer, it is our hope that lessons have been learned from the conduct of the Kawamba by-election, and that all stakeholders, including the police, the ECZ, and political parties across the political divide, will conduct themselves in line with the law so as to protect the integrity of the entire electoral process. I thank you, and may God bless Zambia.
Thank you so much, Iggy. We're now going to open it up to question and answers. So please stick to what we've spoken about in the statement, and we can have the first 3 questions. Any questions? Yes, Darius?
Good morning, Iggy. Darius from Diamond TV. In your statement, you have clearly indicated that TIZ witnessed some senior government officials, some senior members of the BPA reaching out notes. Are you able to name the senior members of the BPA for the sake of transparency?
Okay. Any other questions?
Darius is being clever by adding that line at the end. For the sake of transparency.
Any other questions? Okay, so we can have a response. Yes, you can.
Maybe what you also make there is so minimum because the statement you also get that some political violence.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, what's what?
Yes, also at comparative. I'd like to get your recommendations going forward where government programs are concerned in constituency, because we do have government officials, or let me say, I don't know, there's a thin line between government official and official, but there's a government programs such as the cash for work, social cash transfer, and all these other programs. still have to continue even if there's a by-election. So what would be your recommendation in terms of how to manage that? Because obviously there's no distinct law that guides to say during this period such and such a program cannot take place.
Okay. So we can have responses.
Okay. So for the first question, I will allow Mr. Nachilinga to speak to that because he's the one who was with Kawam. And then the head of program will speak to the second.
Thanks, guys, for that question. Indeed, for the sake of transparency, we have decided to make mention of the political party that was involved in dishing out the 50 quarters, as opposed to indicating the respective government officials that were on the ground. Thank you.
But also, I'm pretty certain that you know which we're counting.
So I wanted to chip in on the third question asked by the Zambia Empowerment Program. So I think as TI said, and you are right to put it to say that there is a thin line between implementing government programs and also campaign. But you will note that when we are in Kawam, the government programs, to some extent, I think they were visible that they are being implemented. And unfortunately, these government programs, especially in the case of empowerment, were during the campaign time. For example, at a rally, you find this government official is telling people to stand in a line of 10, and then they are given 50 quarters to go and form a cooperative. Why don't those activities take place outside the campaign rally? Secondly, why don't the political party leaders themselves do separate themselves from activities of government-related aspects, so that it's quite clear that this is government that is implementing empowerment programs, and this is a political party that is campaigning. So for us, I think what we are recommending is that the government officials that do hold political party positions should actually abstain from attending political party rallies, as it becomes difficult to distinguish either they are implementing government activities or they are implementing political party activities, especially during campaign period.
Yeah, I want to comment on the same question that on. For me, the starting point is the government is well structured from the central level, the provincial level, and to the district. And constituencies normally operate at district level. And each government department is represented at provincial and district level, replicating the structure that is at central. Our concern is that when a minister is on duty campaigning, the question is he on duty as a minister or is on duty as a political party official? Once we answer that question, then we'll know where the problem is. Because once the minister is down in a constituency that is experiencing a by-election, it's difficult to distinguish that this minister is operating as a minister of youth or minister of commerce. But also what is saddening is that they overshadow the substantive officers that are supposed to represent government at district level. Today I'll ask you, is the government empowerment programs that the ministers were promoting in Kawambo, are they going on now? If the answer is yes, then there is nothing wrong. But you and I know the answer is no. So the fact that consciously ministers decide to take advantage of government programs to ride on as they campaign is clearly a wrong action, and we need to push and advocate that this comes to an end. Government is independent of the ruling political party. The government should function with or without the ruling party. Other jurisdictions, it's very clear. You can have elections every day, but government does not stop operating. And what we are calling is a situation where there is decency in the way we do politics, not where it suits us, we are doing government programs. When it doesn't suit us, government has its own operational structures to do the work. Let's be consistent. And the fact that it is difficult to distinguish whether the Minister of Commerce that was there, we have mentioned the portfolio, the Minister of Youth that was there, it's not clear whether they were acting as ministers of these ministers. I raise huge questions, and they should desist from using political activities to perpetrate what they report to government programs.
But maybe also just in addition to what the gentleman said, colleagues, you will know that this is not a new thing, okay? And when you look at, sometimes I wonder when I look at the political parties and politicians generally, it's as if they read from the same playbook. Like there's a playbook that everybody just follows to the letter. This is not a new thing. And the irony is that when the UPND were in opposition, when PF were in power, these are some of the anomalies that they condemned themselves. I mean, we saw government empowerment programs suddenly being accelerated in areas where elections or by-elections are taking. So this is not a new phenomenon. And so what we are maybe saying is that the UPND should basically just stick to what they said they were going to do things differently. Now, when you see the same things that were still happening even in the current regime, that's why we are asking the questions that we are asking. Because for us, an anomaly is an anomaly. It doesn't matter whether it's PF, whether it's UPND, whether it's Lightning and Thunder Party doing it. It doesn't matter. There's no Lightning and Thunder Party. But the point is that these anomalies have been there for a very long time. And the current regime, when they were in opposition, they condemned these anomalies. So how then and why then should they be advancing the same things that they condemn? So basically, let's just do the correct thing, even as a nation.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions before we close? Any other questions perhaps on the upcoming events as well? So in the statement it was indicated that the CPI is coming up. The Zambia Bribe Payers Index as well is coming up. So any questions, any clarification needed?
Maybe Zanji, before you go, there was another question I think this areas about the arrest. So we mentioned in our statement the two cases of violence that we saw, and Mr. Najwinga is just whispering to me that it was one of those two cases, but we are not in a position to give a very comprehensive reaction now. Maybe that's something that we can look at and then we can speak to the media at an appropriate time about it. But for now, all we will mention is that it is one of the issues that we covered in the statement, but we are not able to give a comprehensive position right now.
Okay. So no other questions? Yes, Derek?
In the CPI, talking about that, how do you rate the performance of or the government in terms of the fight against corruption and concerns that they're concentrated on past corruption? Majority of those that are standing for courts former ministers, former PSS, and only maybe one
from the current government that has appeared before. Is that the corruption in the
Okay. Any other question before we get a response? No? I think we can get a response.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe let me go first. I'm sure my colleague will come in. If I'm not mistaken, this perception, and I'll stick to it as a perception. This perception started as early as towards the end of the first year of BPN power. And I think that when people ask such questions, they are actually communicating something to government. That yes, you are doing something about this price, but we think you can do better. And the onus is on government to listen carefully. The problem that I see is first of all, the way the fight against corruption is structured. We seem to emphasize, SEC has three prominent departments, isn't it? There is the education, community, what's they call it, community education, there is the investigation, there is the prevention, okay? But what we seem to pay attention to is one department, investigation. But also coupled with this is the problem of how this is communicated. There should be some level of consistency in the way anti-corruption is communicated. Are politicians the only people that are involved in corruption? Why don't we capture them the way we capture politicians? That's the starting. Second, why dramatize just calling a politician to be questioned? You're just getting initial information. You want to dramatize it, and you call the media, and what you're doing is you're creating expectation in the public, isn't it? And the people will want to hear the results. And if it ends at just publicizing, questioning political figure, then we ask the motive. What is the motive behind dramatizing, questioning a political figure? The other issue that I will talk, because most of these things we responded to in the past, the other issue I'll respond to is, why don't we have somewhat a systematic way of giving updates about what we are doing around anti-corruption? Even quarterly updates, where you give comprehensively big issues that we are dealing with as anti-corruption and communicate in terms of the update, in terms of the progress that we're making. But when you are inconsistent, today there is a press conference because Mr. I'm not saying it's corrupt. Mr. Nyambe has been mentioned in some report. Tomorrow you keep quiet when a similar report is out. You are creating confusion. So the challenge is for the SEC to have a very robust communication strategy, consistent communication strategy. But more important, they start explaining what the real function of the Anti-Corruption Commission is. Anti-Corruption Commission is not just about investigations and going to court. What are we doing around corruption prevention? Actually, that's where the money should go. What are we doing about community education? Today, I'll challenge, and you prove me wrong. Politics has become, if not the best career that one wants to get. Because money is flowing in politics. And I would rather be a politician and make money than be a doctor and save people. But is that the correct perception? No. Politicians ordinarily are supposed to save, not to reap. But what is happening is the opposite. So for me, the issue of whether or not government is committed to the fight against corruption is a challenge to both the Anti-Corruption Commission, of course, those are our colleagues, but there is no wrong in challenging them, in making sure that they intensify clarifying what their role is, but also strengthen and come up with a robust communication strategy that will give confidence to the people. To the government, I think that actually I agree with what Idris said. UPND has a very opportune chance to change the way politics have happened in the country, because what they talked about for opposition, in my view, was very progressive. And we thought we can turn around political activity in a manner that gives confidence to the people, but if people are still asking questions, there's something wrong that is happening, and we need to continue calling that out so that government does the correct thing.
Maybe just to add to that, Darius was asking about the ship, wondering whether it means that there's no corruption in the current regime. Of course, that is nowhere near the truth. First of all, and this is something I think that will make clear as we go closer towards the next CPI. When there is an improvement, for example, in the CPI score, it does not mean or show that now the corruption issue has been sorted. I think you'll recall that the last year when we launched the CPI, which showed a 4-point improvement. I think there was a lot of reactions from many different sectors where they were saying, but how can TIZ say that there's been an improvement when there's this issue, First of all, it's not TIZ, because like you heard, this is a global study. But second, if there's an improvement in the score, it does not mean that now corruption has been addressed, that there is no corruption anymore. And I think that is a point that that needs to be taken. But also, when you talk about there being no corruption in the current administration, of course, that is not what we are saying. And if you will recall that in our end of year statement last year, our end of year in December, we did highlight quite a number of issues that we thought the government needed to look at. You will know that there was the issue of the Solicitor General, the investigation of the Solicitor General. We said that to date we don't have any update as to what has transpired with that investigation, because the Solicitor General was accused essentially of corruption, and the SEC themselves confirmed that he is under investigation. So we raised that issue. There was an issue of the cabinet ministers that the SEC said are under investigation for what? For corruption. So there's your answer. If you say, are we saying that there's no corruption in the current regime? There are definitely accusations that have been made about people in the current regime to do with corruption. And this has been confirmed by the SEC, who have said that these people are being investigated. So for us, the call that we are making is that let there be transparency even in the manner these investigations are being conducted. For example, why should there be no update on the Solicitor General? This is almost, I think, over a year now since that statement was made by the SEC. So it's things like this which I think are causing us a lot of concern, and these are issues that we keep pushing on until we see a change.
Okay, thank you so much, David. So we are now going to have closing remarks by Mr. Raymond Ndele.
Thanks, Zanji. Mine is just to thank you colleagues that have come from the media. Without you, of course, we can't disseminate this information widely, and we need to recognize your commitment and you finding time to come and feedback from us. But also, as we start 2025, we appeal to you through the mechanism that we created, that we continue engaging and discussing. Let's not just there are a lot of things that happen daily here. But if you wait for press conferences like this, I think you miss a lot. Let's not just talk about the negative aspects that are happening in the fight against corruption. I think there is a lot of good things that is coming out of collaborative efforts in the fight against corruption. I don't know, some of you, if you know how many focus areas we focus on as we do our work and what actually is happening in those focus areas. Then you appreciate what actually is going on. Government positive response and contribution, but also government's negative response and contribution. And so that the communication around anti-corruption is not just based on events, but based on the development processes that are happening in the country. So I'm challenging you to engage us more and not to wait for press conferences. So that you get this information and we see you as a conduit that will communicate our contribution towards the fight against corruption. So again, I want to just thank you and wish you all the best in your busy schedules. I'm sure you are running to other events that are happening, and we look forward to seeing how we recover us starting from midday, evening, and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Anthony. So we can have a closing prayer by Jesmondine.
We are praying. Thank you, dear Father, for this opportunity to discuss issues of this Secretariat. We pray that the message that is being sent out, Lord, may be delivered accordingly, and that there will be positive change in this nation. We thank you for today. We do this in your name.
Thank you very much. So you can see me